I studied counterpoint and harmony when I was 10, and I learned to write with a pencil. And then I studied composition in college with a great composition teacher, John Bavicki. And he had a great influence on me in terms of writing choral music, which led into my love of writing for the voice. And I've done everything, you know, in different aspects of music over the years. Like I started in radio in Toronto, CBC radio, and then I did CBC television, and then television in the States, and started doing writing for film in the late 70s with David Cronenberg. I saw David Cronenberg on his motorcycle in the neighborhood. We grew up together in a similar neighborhood in Toronto, and he had a beautiful Ducati, and he had beautiful leather motorcycle clothes. And David's a few years older than me, but you would see him, he'd be 17 and I was 14. So when you're 14, you don't have your license, and you see this vision, this kid who's a little older than you but can drive and has a beautiful motorcycle. You're well aware of him. And I knew that he made short films. He made 8mm and 16mm films that would play on the weekends at underground film festivals and midnight screenings and things like that. This is when I was more like a teenager, 17, 18. And so I knew David's work. And and I knew him a little bit through mutual friends, so it took a few years. I think I was, now maybe in my late 20s, and I approached him, and I had done one film to that point, and I asked him if he would take me on as a composer for his new film that he was doing, The Brood, and he agreed, took me on, and we had a good working collaboration on The Brood, and we continued on Scanners and Videodrome and The Fly, and on it went for 30 wonderful years. I've done 15 films with David over the years, and he sends me his scripts very early on, and I start reading research material. In the case of Crash, I had a great book. You know, we had Ballard's book to study. I read other books by Ballard. I love research, so I really delve into the research aspect of filmmaking. And David gives me a lot of freedom to create scores for his films.
I thought that was you up there.
I was just interested in music. I did some directing when I was younger, and some acting, some writing, and most of my friends were involved in those aspects of theater, really. And we were like a little repertory group, and I just kind of went into music because I had a strong interest in that, but not really for film. My interest has always really been in music, in composition. And so film, because I was a young student, I didn't have the wherewithal to be able to go into recording studios and spend time in recording studios or work with orchestras. Or I had a lot of ideas, compositional ideas, and I wanted to exercise them. And I thought film was experimental enough for me to try the things I wanted to try. Like Crash is a pretty experimental score. So that after working with David Cronenberg for a number of films, we arrived at a place both in terms of filmmaking and also in music that we could achieve a film like Crash, and the score to Crash in particular, which is, as I say, a fairly experimental score. I do it visually, actually. It's music is I'm interested in the notation of music. I write my music with pencil by hand. So I like the graphic nature of the piece and of the work I'm doing. And what I usually do is try to capture on paper what I'm feeling and hearing internally. It's very internal art, really. And you're trying to capture a feeling, a mood, a certain idea that you had. In the case of Crash, specifically in Crash, the work came out of a counterpoint. A music counterpoint. For the film we did before Crash, it was called M Butterfly, and it was set in the Far East, and I used two harps, orchestral harps, and I placed them in the orchestra left and right of the podium. And then, that was the first time I had written for two harps. And then for Crash, I wanted to extend the counterpoint and write for three harps, which is essentially what the piece is all based on, a three-part counterpoint for three harps, and they're placed left, center, right. And then I recorded 6 electric guitars, 2 guitars playing each of the harp parts, left, center, right. The amps all set exactly the same. And everybody reading the harp music, but up an octave. And then I added 4 woodwinds and 2 percussionists playing all metal percussion. So, and then resampled and kind of mutated part of the score. Maybe about 20–25% is resampled and altered in its sampling rates, in its octaves and things like that. It used a small group of musicians, 14, 15 musicians, and the combination was unique. It was 3 acoustic harps, big orchestral harps, and 6 electric guitars, 2 percussionists playing all metal percussion, sculpture and prepared piano, and then 4 woodwinds, alto flute, flute, clarinet, bass clarinet. And it was a score that was really created in the studio as a work designed for the studio. It was, created in this surround miking technique, and then mixed for the theater. I'm going to show you the drawings of that. So here, this one, I put M Butterfly up here. This was the film before Crash. And what I'm indicating here is how the harps, these 2 harps, there's harp 1 here and harp 2, they're recorded left, center, right to the podium in a surround microphone setup. And then this is, the 2 harps evolved to the counterpoint of writing for 3 harps. And this was also set up left, center, right, harp 1, 2, and 3. And then the 6 electric guitars were set in the same position as the harps. So guitar 1 was here, and 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Here's the podium, or the center of the audience, where the audience, think of this as the proscenium in the theater, and here's the audience. And this is the surround image. And then there was 2 metal percussionists. They're playing prepared piano and metal sculpture, and then 3 woodwinds. So it's a total of 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, and 3 woodwinds, 14 players. The opening was originally a 3-part counterpoint, and it was written for 3 harps and recorded with the 3 harps, and then the 6 guitars were added to the 3 harps. And then I think for the opening I removed the harps because they were overdubbed, and so you're just hearing the electric guitars in the opening, and they're playing that 3-part work. Here's some of the score. Here's some of the counterpoint that I was working out. Like, here's the score to the opening of the film. And you can see it's not orchestrated. it's not designating the parts that are being played. It's just showing you the actual composition that was used, the counterpoint. And then I assigned these different lines to different harps, and then the guitarists played the same parts, but up an octave. Here's more score. You can see it's all written in this contrapuntal style. That's a blank page. And then, let's see. Again, just showing you the counterpoint. It's very improvisational in some sense. The piece was written to 75%, was all notated. And then once that 75, 80% of the music was created in the studio, was played, I then improvised the other 25%. Do you know what I mean? I sampled it, I slowed it down, I did things with the tempos, with the range of the other 25%. I kind of mutated it and put it back in and remixed it into the other 75% of the score. So it was kind of, that part of it was the improvisational part of it, and the fact that I was doing this in the studio as I was recording the work. I was also doing this thing where I was taking the recordings and putting them back into the film, into the music mix. I was using a very large computer at the time called the Synclavier, a very powerful music computer. And that did all the sampling. And that was the beginning, that computer, of digital sampling. And I had access to it in the late 70s. And so I was using this computer for Crash specifically to do this resampling and this mutation of the score, and then editing it and mixing it back into the recorded score. I was interested in electronic music as a kid. And actually, some of my real influences were electronic musicians, like composers like Toru Takemitsu, the great Japanese composer, wrote a whole series of electronic music, which was very influential to me. I heard it when I was in my teens, and I loved Cage and Subotnick, and I was really interested in electronic music for a long time. Still am, actually. Here's some of the score. So usually what I'm doing is I'm going from these sketches in ink and then putting them into the score. These are the three guitars that were each played by two guitars on each. There's three separate lines, but each had two guitars on each part. There's 6 guitars. All the amps were set exactly the same. So they had the same volume and reverb. It was like a chamber, think of it as chamber music. It just happens to be a unique orchestration. But it's like, think of it like chamber music. I don't listen to music when I'm composing. And if I do listen to music, it's something specific that I'm interested in. But because I was writing for a very unique group of instruments, I wasn't listening to anything even closely aligned with that group. What I was doing with Crash was writing a pure music piece. It could have been a concert piece. It just happened to be a piece that was created for this film. But it was a contrapuntal piece that I was interested in musically. David usually would send me a copy of the script very early on, or he'd even let me know what he was thinking about. Then he might call and say, I'm thinking of doing a film on the Ballard book, J.G. Ballard book, Crash, and I'd immediately start to reading the book. And if he sent me the script, I'd study the script, and we'd talk about casting usually. And then I might visit the set during the shooting and collect the ideas as he's shooting. As he's shooting, I'm basically writing the score. I'm start writing away from the film. I don't really need the imagery of the film to create the score. I can work from the imagery of the book and the script, and then as I have the film comes in, I start to apply what I've written to the film. I like that technique because you're not working so directly with what's on screen. You can work more with the subtext and the inner workings of the film and express a broader idea than what you're actually feeling when you're watching the film on screen. I think of it as working in layers. So the composition is first, and then the composition going into the film is really kind of part of the scoring process, like a different phase. Like once you have the musical ideas you're going to work with, now you're trying to figure out how they're going in the film and where they're going in the film. And then there's an orchestration phase, which is how do you realize the music? Film music is essentially a recorded art. So you're now going through the process of writing for the actual recording. You know, who's going to play it, how many musicians will play it, what parts of the electronics are you going to use, and that becomes a different phase. And then there's actually the recording process, and then there's editing and producing and mastering and mixing and all of that.
This is a work of art. Absolutely a work of art.
I think he trusted me. I think he spotted the movie with me very carefully. You know, we went over the film together. And he treated me the way he treated his actors. He's very egalitarian. He lets people create their work for the film. And he just opens up the landscape and looks, you know, what lets you create. And then he might edit a little bit. So, I mean, he worked with me in a great way, like the way he would work with, say, Jeremy Irons on set, and he let him develop the piece, and then maybe he edited a little bit. And that's what I was experiencing with him through really all of the films that I've done with him. It was an idea, you know, the harps and the electric guitars, and you're not entirely sure of how that will all just going to work together, and the woodwinds and the percussion. And the fact that it worked so beautifully, I felt, in the recording, I was very happy with it. I was very happy with the results, so that made it successful to me.
Whoa, what's that?
It's one of the great films that he made, I feel, and along with The Fly, Dead Ringers, I mean, these are wonderful, really wonderful work. So it might be his most adventurous film, but great. And the acting's great, the editing's beautiful, the production design, the cinematography. It's a really well-balanced film with the filmmakers that we had been working with for many years. David is a good writer, and he's interested in film in a very unique way. He has his own ideas about how to use film, how to tell, express certain ideas in film. Sometimes he lets the narrative, he doesn't push the narrative, he lets it just evolve from his films. He lets the viewer have his own experience, and he's very forward thinking in terms of how the movies are, you know, how he creates the films. So he's a filmmaker that's really always, I think, always kind of ahead of us. I'm always constantly feeling like I'm catching up to David, even now as he's older. film allowed me a lot of breadth of music ideas, and I got to work with, say, Ornette Coleman for Naked Lunch, allowed me a whole other, that's another Cronenberg film, that's wonderful. So that opened up a whole other area of it. You know, Ornette was improvising to the orchestra, and my background has been, you know, I love jazz, so I love the idea of improvisation, but I do notate just about everything I write is notated by hand in the old-fashioned way, but I like improvisation. I like the real live quality of anything can happen. I love that. The interesting thing about, as you used to call it, the repertory company, is that there's no looking back. Because you can't, you know, somebody might hear something like a score like The Fly, and then they want you to do a movie and maybe do something that's kind of like The Fly. But the thing with the Cronenberg films is that you can never go back because you've already done that. People know that. So if you look at the 15 films, each one is unique and has its own character and its own sound. You can't really say that that one's like that score. They're all completely unique, and that's kind of a testament to his innovative work. I like what he's doing. I like what he's doing with film, and it's very unique. He has his own way of using film, or he has his own idea of what films should be and what they could be. And so when you have the aspect of working with a collaborator like that, you want to be there for somebody like that because it's so innovative. He's completely growing and changing and evolving all the time.